Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly O'Horo, and this is Adaptable Behavior Explained. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to Adaptable today. I'm your host, Kelly O'Horo, and we're going to dig into the topic of disorganized attachment style today. If you're interested in the attachment series, we did an episode on avoidant. Last week, the week before, we did anxious attachment. And then prior to that, we did a secure attachment episode. If you'd like an overview during season 1, I did a show on just the 4 attachment styles in brief. But we had some requests for us to dig in. So here you go. We're going to do that today. For those of you who don't know or who are just tuning in, I created this show because a lot of times people behave in ways that we can't understand, and all behavior is adaptive in some way, shape, or form. And so this whole show is dedicated to helping people understand those complex and misunderstood behaviors. So today we're going to discuss disorganized attachment. If you've ever felt torn between craving closeness and fearing it and pushing it away, or if relationships feel really chaotic or confusing or usually unsafe, then this is your episode. Or if you love someone or know someone who is described that way, then you're going to want to tune in. So disorganized attachment. This is the least common of attachment styles, and it is always rooted in trauma. And it's really described as a blend of anxious and avoidant attachment styles, but it's more than that. Those early experiences, just like all attachment is born, this type of attachment style really shows up when a caregiver was both a source of comfort and also a source of fear or danger. And so this style is marked by like an internal conflict. I want closeness, but I'm afraid of it. I don't know how to feel safe with others, and love can feel dangerous. So people with disorganized attachment really might crave intimacy, but severely push others away. And so it's very confusing, not just for you, but for the people who care about them. Experience intense emotional swings, often struggle with trust and emotion regulation. They feel confused about their own needs and boundaries, and they're always questioning if they're even relevant or should be having those feelings or needs. And so this style often develops in environments where trauma or neglect or fear were present, especially in those early years of life. How does disorganized attachment shape relationships? Well, it creates a really distressful push and pull dynamic in a relationship, whereas the person desperately seeks connection and then will suddenly withdraw or sabotage it. So there's key traits that come up with someone with disorganized attachment. There's a deep-rooted fear of abandonment and potentially fear of engulfment, both at once. And so it's very hard to navigate a nervous system if this is happening to them. Their difficulty regulating their own emotions and often experience very intense highs and very intense lows. Hypervigilance is one of the traits that will show up. So they're constantly scanning for danger or rejection. And they're looking for things that will prove their feelings to justify their emotional experience. And so there's a lot of confusion about boundaries. They can either be really rigid or too porous. And there's self-protective behaviors like shutting down, lashing out, or oftentimes dissociation is a character trait that happens with disorganized attachment. So some things that are commonly seen in relationship patterns can look like, chaos, unpredictability, emotional volatility. They can feel like emotional roller coasters, these relationships. The other thing that happens is like an idealization. So this is someone who puts someone so high on a pedestal that there's really no chance for them to remain there. And then it can be met with like a catastrophic devaluation of that person or relationship. So a person will be seen as like perfect and no flaws, and then suddenly unsafe or dangerous or really problematic. And so it's like a whiplash. And there's also a thing called a sabotage cycle. So just as closeness starts to build in these people, there's like a fear that kicks in, and they don't usually know that's happening. And then the person will pull away or create a conflict to create the distress. And so this style often stems, like I said before, from early trauma where a caregiver was frightening or neglectful or emotionally unstable. And so again, just like the other attachment styles, it's rooted in our caregiver experience, and it's not our fault, although it can feel like it can be personal sometimes. But it's really important to just better understand what's going on. So when we look at early childhood trauma and disorganized attachment, it's always at the roots of this attachment style. And again, just like all attachment formation, this happens 0 to 3. Some theorists say 5. And disorganized attachment often develops in environments that are marked by relational trauma. So this is where someone is personally mean, harmful, or unsafe. The child's nervous system becomes really dysregulated because the person they rely on for safety and love and comfort is also a source of fear or confusion. And so, some examples of early trauma that contribute to this disorganized attachment can be abuse, both physical, emotional, or sexual, or neglect. So, the caregiver may have been violent or threatening or really unpredictable, either physically or emotionally. The neglect base of this cannot be quite so obvious. So, like basic emotional or physical needs were not met. No comfort when someone was distressed. Maybe they were often left in soiled diapers and not paid attention to. And there was no consistent presence from the caregiver. And so the child then learns not just can I count on them, but I might not be worth existing. And so it's really painful for someone with disorganized attachment to relate because it feels so scary in relationship. Oftentimes there was exposure to domestic violence. Even if they weren't directly harmed, they saw or witnessed violence between caregivers, which creates fear, or violence toward another sibling. Creates a lot of instability in the nervous system. Another thing that can create some disorganized attachment would be a parent who is addicted to substances, prescription drugs, alcohol, anything that pulls a person out of emotional presence and not emotionally available or present for the child. So the caregiver might have been just really erratic or frightening, potentially, on the substance or when withdrawing from a substance. And so substances oftentimes obviously create a bit of an unstable nervous system in a person. And then our offspring become unfortunate witnesses and experiencers of that environment. Another thing that can create this disorganized attachment are having a parent with a mental illness. So severe depression, psychosis, personality disorders, chronic PTSD can really lead to an inconsistent or frightening caregiver. And so then what happens is the child can't trust the safety of their caregiver. Potential loss or abandonment. So a caregiver may have died or disappeared or have been emotionally absent during really critical bonding periods and developmental times in one's life. And so for a child, this ends up making them feel dissociative. They have to disconnect from their real life experience because it's too painful. Maybe they freeze at the onset of distress because they're unsure whether comfort is coming or danger is coming, and they can't count on it, and their nervous systems don't have enough traction or runway to know the difference. They might develop contradictory behaviors like approaching a caregiver and then pulling away. So again, push pull, I don't know what to count on and should I or not. Oftentimes they feel unsafe in their own bodies and relationships, not just in relationships. So let me give you an example of what this might look like. Let's say a toddler is crying and they reach for comfort from the caregiver, but then the parent responds with anger or withdrawal, or worse, smacks them. The child then learns, like, my feelings are dangerous. I don't know what to expect. And over time, this creates this fractured sense of self and others. Trust is very difficult to manage or understand. And so we talked about the fact that EMDR therapy can help to address the early attachment wounds, and other somatic therapies like sensory motor or somatic experiencing, especially when combined with EMDR therapy, are really the gold standard for helping us to reprocess those early experiences, which can allow adults to build safety and coherence in their relationships. But without a lot of work, this attachment style doesn't resolve on its own. It's a very hard attachment style to overcome, because of what we talked about. Just the levels of trust are just not there in the nervous system. And it's just so much to tolerate for a person who deals with this. And just so you know, if they are aware of it, they know it and they feel a lot of shame about it. They don't want to be this way, but they don't know how to trust, and they don't know how to be in their bodies with a more consistent reliance on the fact that others could potentially show up for them. And so it's very painful for someone with this attachment style specifically, not just for you who cares about them, but for them to be stuck and trapped in these patterns. For them, it looks like confusion, intensity, and fear. And so They then respond or react to those fears and their confusion by that push pull, wanting the closeness and then suddenly needing space and pushing away. And so that's very confusing, not just for them, but for someone that they care about or for the person that they care about. And it can look like this emotional volatility where there's this intense reaction uh, to perceived rejection or perceived abandonment when in fact that's not happening, but their body doesn't know the difference. And so they are off to the races with these triggers and they really do believe it's true. And so that can be really hard. There's a tremendous fear of intimacy, feeling very exposed or unsure when there's an emotional closeness. And so one of the default protection patterns would be to sabotage that connection, pick fights, withdrawing, blaming, things like, I just can't be in this relationship. We just have to be different because of whatever their fear is that's coming up. And then when they don't have a choice or when their bodies are going too fast, dissociation or shutting down will be another default mode of someone with disorganized attachment. And oftentimes numbing out during emotional moments, whether they mean to or not, will happen. So, for example, someone with a disorganized attachment might feel deeply vulnerable in a moment, like sharing a fear, but then suddenly feeling exposed and unsafe, and then withdrawing and saying, never mind, I'm good. And then it looks like cold, it looks like distant, or even worse, sometimes they might start a conflict to create distance because if the conflict happens, the person is kind of taken by surprise. And then all of a sudden, they'll move away as well, the person that was in the moment. And so it subconsciously creates distance because the connection is too scary. Another example that might show up for someone in a disorganized attachment strategy would be like during an argument, they might kind of swing from pleading for that reassurance and needing it, and then all of a sudden lashing out in anger, and it seems out of nowhere, out of nowhere. So basically what's happening is that internal message, like, I need you, but I don't trust you. So that's where that push pull comes in. And these behaviors aren't meant to be manipulative, even though it can feel like that and can look like that. They really are protective in nature, and they really reflect just the nervous system that was shaped by early chaos. And the message that child received is don't trust, it's dangerous, people can't be trusted, and then they continue that strategy. And again, you can heal from disorganized attachment. It's possible, but it really takes time. It takes current levels of safety in relationships that one can learn to trust in, and a lot of compassion for self and a lot of compassion for others and patience from others. So some things that you can kind of have in your tool belt for healing with disorganized attachment is that, building relationships that can learn trust in will create safety in your nervous system. Recognizing that some people can be safe with emotional expression. And if they're safe with emotional expression and they provide warmth, not punishment, you can develop new pathways and you can learn to do something new because not everybody is the same as what you experienced in childhood. But it takes some time to find those people and to trust that. But it all takes slowing down, and that's where EMDR comes in so beautifully, or even ketamine-assisted psychotherapy really helps to slow the nervous system down, which gives you time then to notice when that fear or that confusion arises and gives you a moment to pause before you react, giving you an opportunity to respond. Now, that doesn't mean you're not thinking some of the things that you used to think, but you don't necessarily have to fall victim to behaving in those ways. You might be thinking, don't trust, these people will screw you over. But instead, you say, yeah, let's do lunch. Let's give it a shot. So it's like being aware that it's happening and having enough time to make a different choice. Naming the pattern is important. Like, I'm feeling scared, even though I want connection, and recognizing this is that default protection pattern. And then practicing co regulation, learning to calm your nervous system with others through breathing or touch or allowing for safe physical presence with someone and just being in a safe person's company while practicing vulnerability, which is brave and it's healing and it takes a lot of courage. The other thing that we have to recognize is that we have the ability to gain an internal locus of control, meaning we don't have to rely on others for our sense of safety or meaning or purpose. So thinking about like what makes you feel grounded. Relationships do feel safe. And even if they don't currently feel safe, kind of take an assessment. What relationships have been consistent? Where you can build a sense of self outside of trauma is really the key to healing. It's recognizing that not everybody mirrors the behaviors of your caregivers and trying to remain open to that possibility. So, disorganized attachment can make life feel very chaotic, not just for you if you have this, but also for the people that love you and care about you. But healing come and it brings clarity. And when you're working towards these things, start small, have compassion, celebrate moments of safety. Every time you stay present during your discomfort, you're growing. Every time you can show up with a vulnerable moment and not kind of run away from it or sabotage it, this is growth. And it gives you an opportunity to reconnect with yourself. So find small moments of safe pleasures that remind you of your resilience and how much you've overcome. Because if you have disorganized attachment, you certainly have been through a lot. But remember, you're not broken. These are just protective behaviors, and you're healing from experiences that fractured your sense of safety. But you're adaptable. We are humans are so resilient and adaptable. And this means you can learn. You can learn to trust yourself. You can learn to trust others who've earned that. And the safety of your emotion in relationship with others can improve little by little. So if you have a disorganized attachment, recognize it's rooted in early trauma and fear. It's protective in nature and it creates confusion and emotional swings and difficulty trusting. And it's hard on you and in the people that you're in relationship with. But healing is possible. Whatever we learned, we can unlearn and we can develop a sense of safety and self-awareness. And as long as you have trauma-informed support in your relationships, you can heal because you aren't your trauma. It is not your identity. It's something that happened to you and you can overcome that. So I want you to think about what does make you feel safe. Have you ever had safety in your body? When you have those moments, take them into resonance. And what small steps can you take today toward connection, even if it's minor? These little moments build new pathways in our brain and they build trust in our brain that we can change and we can be different. So thank you so much for tuning in. I know this was a hard one for those of you who struggle with this. But if this episode resonated with you, or if you found it helpful for yourself because you're in relationship with someone who shows up in this attachment strategy, please leave us a like or subscribe. Share your comments. We really appreciate that. And connect with me on social media, Kelly O'Horo. And please stay good to yourself and be compassionate with yourself if you're working on this. So until next time, don't forget to lead with love. It'll never steer you wrong.